Listen, keeping people around for the long haul has always been difficult, and it will always be difficult. But when it comes to podcasting, there's a few things you can do to sustain that audience retention, and I'm going over them now. Let's do it. What's up, everybody, and welcome to another video. I am Matt with I Edit Podcast, and this week we're talking about how to keep your listeners for the long haul. All right, so let's just jump right into it. Number one is to incorporate seasons into your podcast. Now, this might seem like a little bit of an arbitrary thing, but you'll be surprised at how more willing your listeners are to stick around when they know what they're getting themselves into. They know they have this package to consume, and then they have this package to consume, and so on and so forth. They know when you're coming back, when you're taking a break, and they have to, it's like a time limit. They have to tune in now or it won't be the same experience. So one thing that you could do is have a theme for each season. So let's say if you had a true crime podcast, one theme would be serial killers, and then the next theme would be maybe vengeance. And the next theme, and so on and so forth. You have a theme for each of your seasons, so you can kind of craft your episodes around that. Now, that's just a suggestion. You don't have to do that, but it's good to kind of bulk your episodes together sometimes if you have a podcast that can do that. All right, number two is to keep your listeners engaged. And what I mean by that is maybe you have a trivia question at the end of your show that the audience has to write in and answer and see how many got it right. Maybe you have listener stories that they can write in. You have them submit segment ideas, catchphrases, anything to have an open line of communication between you and your audience. That way you can build that trust, you can build that relationship, so your listeners will want to come back week after week to hear their own voice or to hear their own words that they've written. Because for some reason, it's still exciting hearing your own voice or hearing your own words on a podcast that you listen to all the time. Even if you know it's not a huge podcast, it's still exciting to hear a stranger read your words or listen to your voice for whatever reason. All right, so number three comes down to content. If you have interesting content, if you have interesting conversations, then your listeners will kind of naturally stay engaged with the content because it's something that they're interested in. It's something that they have to pay attention to in order to get all the information that they want. So this is something that's a little bit more tough to improve on. If you're not putting in the work that you think it deserves or you think that you should or could do, then maybe that's a place to start. I know this is a little bit tough, but try and work on your content and get it better and better each time you put out a podcast. So number four is all about audio quality. Now, if you have poor audio quality, then maybe it's hard to hear for the listener of what you're saying. Maybe their ear is going to get fatigued a little bit from listening to you. It just loses a little bit of that trust that you've built up with your audience because they kind of expect you to put out something that's easy to listen to. So in my last video, I covered some tips on how to improve your audio without having to buy anything or purchase anything. But when it comes to good quality audio, I'm not asking you to spend an arm and a leg here. Just do all the little things right, and if you're recording with your phone, stop doing that immediately. All right, number five is to use your personality in your show so people kind of build trust with you. They kind of know who you are and build this relationship to where they want to tune in week after week because they know you, because they know your personality and want to hear your opinions about things. So this one is a little bit subjective and obviously it depends on the person. But I'm kind of a big fan of maybe just accentuate your personality a little bit more when you're on mic. So you're putting on a show, right? And you want to be able to make that show as good as possible and make it interesting. So you're kind of just accentuating yourself a little bit more and kind of extending your personality. So it makes you a little bit more welcoming and it makes your audience more likely to tune back in because they have a relationship with you now because they want to hear your voice week after week and they want to hear that personality come through the podcast because now they have this friend that they listen to week after week. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's what it kind of feels like, is you have this friend that you can't talk to but talks to you every week. All right, so number 6 is all about distribution. So I know this one's a little bit more logistical, but you want to be on as many platforms as you can be. That way, no matter what the listener has, or you don't want there to be any barriers between them and listening to you. No matter what phone they have, no matter what app they have, it's always going to be available to them. So if your audience doesn't have an iPhone and you are only on Apple Podcasts, that's half the market wiped out right there. So keep your podcast spread out, keep it distributed to as many different platforms as you can, and that should be through your host. That you should be able to figure that out, whatever host you have. Just try and spread it out as wide as you can so that everybody gets the chance to listen to it. So the last one, number 7, is social media. Now this one might seem a little bit obvious, but this is where you really get your listeners engaged. This is where you would ask them to submit their stories, segment ideas, if you have any trivia. This is where you can really have that open line of communication with your audience, where they can ask you questions as well as you asking them questions. You can really build that relationship. I know I keep using that term, but that's a really important step in gaining listeners and keeping those listeners through the long haul, is building that relationship, building that close-knit community with other people who are interested in the same topic as you. There's a lot of ways that you can utilize social media, and of course, communicating with your audience being a big one, but you can also create a hashtag during your show. You can add value to your industry or your niche. There's a lot of other ways to utilize social media other than engaging with your audience. So those are a few tips on how to keep your listeners around for the long haul. All right, guys, thank you for watching this video. If you are a fan of what I'm doing, hit subscribe if you haven't already, hit the bell, hit like, all that good stuff. If you want to find me on Instagram, I'm at iEditPodcast. And if you're interested in my editing services, you can visit iEditPodcast.com. All right, I'll see you next week. So what I mean by this is simply, my dear boy,